Thank you, ladies. Some of y'all young folks may not recognize that song. Oh, how much he cared for me. What a great, great song. It starts off, I would love to tell you what I think of Jesus. And I hope we have that kind of life and that kind of relationship that we would love to just tell people what he means to us. Thank you for your worship, for your participation. I'm going to put this back here so I won't be too crowded. You know, most people enjoy feeling good. There may be some people that really get a kick out of feeling bad, but that's not most of us. We want to feel good, and there's a lot of human effort that's put into trying to feel good. A lot of it is misplaced. Sometimes we try to eat enough food to make us feel good. And we'll eat too much food, and we may feel good while we're eating it, but we don't feel so good later on. Some people drink to try to feel good. They take drugs to try to feel good. They engage in all sorts of destructive behavior, hoping that somehow it will make them feel good. In fact, I'm afraid that there are a lot of people in America today that spend their entire lives chasing after some kind of good feeling that they can hold on to somehow. And every little buzz, when it wears off, gives a greater need to find a greater buzz. They decide, if I can just be around the right person, if I can just get the right job, or live at the right address, or wear the right clothes, if I can get the right hairstyle, or I can succeed in my job, or succeed in my hobby and recreation, if I can just find that thing that'll give me that good feeling, then life will be good. And unfortunately, a lot of people bring that perspective to church. They show up at church saying, make me feel good. They're expecting that maybe at church I can find that feeling that's going to make everything right. I want you to know that that kind of shallowness attracts large crowds in many churches, where their only goal is to try to pep you up and make you feel better for a few minutes. But it fails to provide the depth and to provide the foundation to sustain us through the difficulties of life. Been preaching through Matthew chapter 23 as Jesus gives the warnings to the people about the Pharisees, about the inadequacy of the religion that the Pharisees taught, and he addressed differences. In this passage today, it's the difference between what people saw on the outside and what was really on the inside. I'm going to read starting in verse 25 of Matthew 23. Jesus says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you clean the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside they are full of robbery and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisees, first clean the inside of the cup and of the dish, so that the outside of it may become clean also. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside appear beautiful, but inside they are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. So you too outwardly appear righteous to men, but inwardly you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness." These two woes attack the attention that the Pharisees gave to ritual cleansing, while failing to give attention to character development, to living as God commands in His words. Cups and plates had to be cleansed ritually before they could be used by the people. And then, of course, dead bodies were the ultimate symbol of uncleanness. If you were going to go to worship, you couldn't go near a dead body. You had to avoid them as much as you could. First, in verse 23, he talks about their wrong priorities. In this first woe, he says their priorities are misplaced. And to make better sense of that, we need to look at the word of that appears in verse 25. We see it twice in there. The first time, it's the typical way of using the word of to show possession or belonging to or belonging with. He says, you clean the outside of the cup, the outside of the dish. It means that they go together. But the second time, it's a completely different word. It's a word that we use the word of, but it means from, or it means as a result of. As in English, we would say, I'm tired of working so hard. What that means is working really hard made me tired. And that's how that word is used in the second of. The Pharisees had a clean appearance on the outside, but they built up dirty, destructive things inside, and they did it through robbery and self-indulgence, through their deceitful lives. Jesus is telling the people, remember, he's not talking directly to the Pharisees. He's talking as if he were talking to them, but he's instructing the people. He's saying it's not good enough to sit in church and look angelic, or to look excited, or to look reverent, or to look happy, or to look however your church wants you to look in church. It's not enough. Instead, make your priority about cleaning up the inside. It's the difference between being nice and being kind. Brother Zach talked about kindness here just a minute ago. Kindness and being nice can look the same on the outside, but inside they're exactly opposite. You see, being nice is based on hiding your true feelings, about deceiving people, about pretending. When you're nice, what you're saying inside is, I'm not going to let you know what I really think. I'm going to make it appear that it's one way when it's really completely different inside me. But kind is based on an inner peace with God. Kindness is received and it's nurtured through loving Him with all your heart and soul and mind and strength, through loving your neighbor as yourself. Kind says inside, I'm so grateful for what God has done for me. I've wronged God more than anyone else could possibly wrong me, and all I can do is treat others the way God has treated me. You see, kind truly wants to help, to make the situation better. Nice acts that way, but secretly inside would really like to smack somebody. It's so much easier to give appearances. It's so much easier for short periods of time to act like everything's okay than it is to actually deal with your own character and actually work at developing into the kind of person God would have you to be. To actually work at making honest changes in your attitude toward other people. Your attitude about how you see them and how you respond to the circumstances of life. It's hard work to try to develop that character that does away with the need for vengeance and nurtures the will to work for the good of others in spite of how they treat you. That's hard work. That's work that only God can do. And it's work that God will only do when you intentionally and continually surrender to His will and let Him change you on the inside. It's a lot easier. It's a lot simpler to just put on a mask. Wear that mask for a few minutes. Just pretend that you're okay. And then as soon as you get to where you can, just vent and just let it out. The Pharisees chose the easy way. They chose making appearances their priority instead of building up depth, because they cared more about themselves and their own comfort, and they cared very little about bringing glory to God. So Jesus gave this simple and profound advice to the Pharisees in the second half of verse 23. He said, clean the inside first. These words should guide our practice as believers. They should define how we live. Our daily pleas to God, asking Him to work in us, should be concerned with what's inside. As we monitor our own lives, as we evaluate our lives, we should have our focus on our motives and our attitudes instead of just about what we do or how we handle the things we're required to do. We should make the mark of spiritual growth about realizing that our attitude has changed, not by how well we've learned to act right even when we don't want to. Now, you do start out acting in a way that maybe you don't want to when you first come to know Christ. But too many Christians make that the end of their Christianity. They never get past that. There ought to be a time when God changes your heart, when He gives you a new perspective, when you've got a new motivation. And Jesus adds something at the end of verse 23 or verse 25 that's just outstanding. He says, so that the outside may be clean. Clean the inside so that the outside will be clean. You know, it's possible to clean up the outside so that you can hide the filth that's on the inside, but it's impossible to clean the inside without it affecting the outside. Jesus said, instead of just polishing the outside and making it look good, you clean up the inside so that the outside will grow from that. You're going to think it's strange for a preacher to say this, but spiritual maturity is not marked by things that we can count and record in our church records. That's not how you measure spiritual maturity. It's seen in growth of graciousness and in the fruit of the Spirit in your life. It's seen in your determination to know and do God's will. And then once you know His will, to act accordingly. And when those kind of internal changes happen, the results show up on the outside in things that we can count and record in the church records. But what you do for God only matters if it's the result of something that He's done in you. Folks, no matter how impressive your worship looks, no matter how angelic the face or how excited you are, that worship only pleases God if it grows from what He's done on the inside. And so, as we go on to verse 27, it tells us that the Pharisees were whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside, disgusting on the inside. The result of cleaning up the outside of the cup while filling the inside from their self-indulgence and their robbery was a totally depraved character. They weren't just rotten on the inside, they were making the inside even more rotten by the choices that they made. Their inner character was the fruit of self-indulgence. I want to tell y'all, the world is going to tell you, take care of number one. Grab all you can get. Put yourself first and make sure you're taken care of. But folks, that's not wisdom. That's not sound logic. That's a lie from Satan. It might seem to you that the way to happiness is by putting myself first, but it's the way to ruin, because it will ruin your character, and that eventually will show up in every part of who you are. Pretending to be holy did not help the Pharisees at all. Instead, it made them even worse, because the more they pretended, the more self-centered they were, which meant the more depraved they came. Now, in that culture, if you were a person of means, you elaborately decorated the graves of your relatives. And remember, their graves were not holes in the ground, they were caves blocked off by a large stone or a rock of some kind. They tried to make those graves as attractive as possible to take away any hint of what might be inside of that grave, even though everybody knew what was inside. Jesus said these beautiful ornate tombs were the perfect illustration of the Pharisees. They were striking on the outside, and they were repulsive on the inside. He said that if you watched their religious activity, you might think that they loved God more than anybody who's ever lived. But if you watched their lives, it would convince you that they knew nothing about God, that they had no desire to know anything about God. If you look back at the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, in verse 16, Jesus says, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." But if you turn over to chapter 6, verse 1, he says this, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before men to be noticed by them." And if you go down to verse 3, he says, "When you give to the poor, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." And in verse 6, he says, "But you, when you pray, go into your inner room and close the door and pray to your Father who is in secret." And down in verse 18, he says, "Your fasting should not be noticed by men, but by your Father who sees in secret." Is Jesus contradicting himself here? Did he say, "Let your light so shine that men will see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven," and then tell them over and over and over, "Do this in secret, do this in secret, do this in secret"? No, he wasn't contradicting himself. You see, he was saying that the things you do that will touch people's lives, that will make a difference, that will help them to know God, are not religious activities. When you go to worship, when you pray, when you give, those things are not to impress people. They're not to be done to show people how spiritual you are. They'll know you're spiritual when you have grace and love and kindness and compassion. When they see you live a different kind of life. Don't think that coming to church this morning was letting your light shine. You were getting your light charged up so it can shine the rest of the week. That's why we're here today. And what makes a difference is not how the checks are made on the church roll. It's how you can behave to people when they hurt you, when they wrong you, when they disappoint you, when they don't do what you think they should. How gracious can you be? How loving can you be? Jesus is teaching in the Sermon on the Mount, and it's exactly the opposite of the way the Pharisees lived, that unbelievers don't see God in your religious activity. They see God in your spirit-filled, spirit-led life. Your justice and your mercy and your grace and your patience. And when you have that peace that's beyond understanding. They see God in the depth of your love for Him and in your love for others, your desire to lift others up, your willingness to wait behind them. They see God in the way you face difficulties and trials and loss and disappointment and mistreatment. In your faithfulness to God, when you can't be derailed from serving Him by flattery or bribery or threats or hostility or anything else. They see God in your humility. When you refuse to elevate yourself and you elevate others even if they don't deserve it. You always find good and find potential for good in everyone you meet. You see, appearance isn't everything. In fact, appearance isn't anything unless there's something underneath that appearance. I want to read a little bit to you from an article that I saw this week. It's about something called felt religion. It says the severe weakness of present day North American Christianity is that its adherents are increasingly less interested in whether Christian proclamation is true and more concerned with how church makes them feel. You hear that? People who come to church are more and more interested in how church makes them feel and less interested whether anything they hear is true, as long as it makes them feel good. Now, here's also from this article, it says, the main reason people abandon Christianity is unanswered intellectual questions, yet many churches treat faith as mostly an emotional experience. It seems that our desire for numbers drives our churches into offering people what they want instead of what they need. But folks, if all we give people is a good feeling, then all we've done is cleaned up the outside and buried those deeper issues inside that need cleaning up. We've heaped decorations on top of those lives so that hopefully we'll forget what's down inside that hasn't been dealt with. In other words, we've done nothing at all. This article helped me to understand a little better about this song that I heard a few weeks ago, and I mentioned at the Easter sunrise service, if you were there. This song is called My Church. When I heard them say, we're going to play a new song called My Church, I got excited. I said, I want to hear that. And then I heard it and I was alarmed. The basic message of this song is, and it's playing on the radios now, I don't need God and I don't need church because listening to my favorite music gives me the same feeling. It's about feeling. I can get in my car and drive and turn up my favorite music on the radio, and I get that feeling. Some of the lines in that song, I find my soul redemption. It's like the Holy Ghost running through you, and I feel my sins wash away. Folks, that's scary. I hope when you hear that it scares you. When I was a child, we sang, "What can wash away my sins?" Nothing but the blood of Jesus. Let's do that again. What can wash away my sins? You heard the first word y'all said? Nothing but the blood of Jesus. It scares me to think that there are more and more people out there who've convinced themselves that if I can find something that makes me feel good, whether it's listening to music or whatever it is that you might do, that I can just soak myself with this activity. I can just bury myself in it, and I can wash all my sins away. And they've replaced faith in Jesus Christ with surges of emotion. And it scares me that someday they will discover a terrible truth when they stand before God and they find out that listening to my favorite music did not wash my sins away. And they'll be forever bound in hell. Folks, truth matters. There are people who are very emotional. There are people who are not emotional at all. Both can worship, because worship is not about being emotional. You be yourself. If you're emotional, that's great. And if you're not, that's great. Don't think one's better than the other. Worship is about responding to the truth. Realizing on my own I'm a hopeless sinner, and Jesus came down to earth to suffer the punishment that my sin deserved, and he offered to forgive my sin if I'll believe in him. The truth is, believing is more than mental agreement. James said the demons believe and tremble. Believing is putting your entire life in his hands, turning your back on the old life and moving forward through his guidance. And there is no other way to gain heaven or avoid hell. In this song, this woman who sings it describes her church as a way to escape the heavy burdens of life. But Christianity is not about escaping from life. It's not about hiding from reality. And church should be about neither of those things. We're here to find strength to face reality. We're here to find the power to overcome through Jesus Christ in us. Today, I'm not proposing that you come here and get a weekly charge of emotion. I'm not proposing that you come here and get distracted from the realities of life for a few minutes each week. We offer a chance to know God personally. We offer something that your sin has permanently prevented, unless you're willing to repent, to put your faith in Jesus and to let him forgive you and cleanse you, and to take you into his family so that you can be a genuine child of God. Folks, what we offer is the deepest, most profound truth in all of human experience. It's not whitewash. It's not pretend. It's not deceptive decorations. It's real and powerful and profound, and it really changes lives. This morning, would you believe in Jesus Christ? Would you put your life in his hands? Would you trust him as your Savior? Or today, if you have done that, have you been exhausting yourself trying to act right on the outside, but you really haven't been paying attention to the inside? This morning, we ask you to commit to put your focus and your attention on the inside, to let him do that work in you that will show up on the outside. Or maybe God's leading you to add your membership to this church. He wants you to join with us to bless each other, to know His will, to do His will, to reach this community with the truth that they so desperately need to hear. Or maybe God is dealing with you about some other decision you need to make. You know that God's been talking to you. You know what He wants. God never speaks without wanting a response. And so at the end of our service, we always give you a chance to respond. Would everyone please stand? God wants you to give Him your all. If you need to respond in any way, you come while we sing.